Breda, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello, Breda.
Hi.
Hello.
So I've titled mine Natural Agriculture on an Urban Allotment. So this is very small scale compared to Marcus and Manuela.
And Mokichi Okada, who started and developed natural agriculture, thought about the principles of it, but naturally the difference in environment, depending on location, climate, surroundings, and so on, makes it difficult to apply one principle for all. So we all have to look into what could be done in different countries, different climates, etc. So by listening to presentations today from 4 participants, we hope that people will learn more about the essence of practice of natural agriculture.
So my name is Breda Mcnamara and I live in Graven Hill in Oxfordshire. I moved here in August 2019 from Northeast London to a self-build. And I work in London part-time as a nurse in a doctor's surgery. So I've more time to follow my hobbies and interests, and they include gardening. And I've always been interested in health and healthy eating and trying to influence others as well with healthy lifestyle and eating. I also practice meditation and I do lots of arts and crafts. I grew up in Ireland in a dairy farm, and we grew most of our own produce. And I also had an allotment when I lived in London. But I'm still learning, and I do believe that nature teaches us everything if we listen and observe. And I've also visited Yatesbury, and I was very impressed. And I just felt that this is how I want to practice growing my own produce. So for those of you who are not too sure whereabouts Oxfordshire in relation to the rest of England, it's a landlocked county. It's still only 60 miles from London or thereabouts. And it's actually, the climate is a bit different to London, even though it's not very far away. So what surprised me was how much later we can get frosts. And just a little bit about the principles of natural agriculture from my understanding of it. It's about having respect for nature and continuous cropping versus crop rotation. So I grew up thinking that crop rotation was the way to practice growing your vegetables. In fact, there seems to be an awful lot of evidence for growing the same plants in the same place year on year. Not using insecticides, even organic ones, and not using fertilizer or manure, and using rainwater if possible. So I got allocated an allotment, to my surprise, within a couple of weeks of applying for it. And that was just over a year ago now, and it was very overgrown. The council trimmed it for me, and the rest was up to me, really. So it measures 44 meters by 7, so it's quite sizable for one person. And I pay £44 a year to the council, which is, it's just peanuts, really. My 2 friends and neighbours, they're a couple, they help me as they like gardening, but they don't really want the responsibility of an allotment. So that's worked well because when I'm at work, they can water, etc. So when I first got the allotment, there was a lot of like thick kind of undergrowth, lots of not so much weeds, but sort of lots of strong grasses. And it definitely needed to be dug over for the first time. So we didn't really have much of a plan. So we spent the whole year just clearing it of rubbish, digging the whole area, but little bit by little bit. We actually enjoyed the process. It was hard work, but actually it was beautiful to be out there throughout the year. We were growing vegetables from seeds at home. We all had seeds growing in our south-facing living room or dining room. The whole place was covered in seedlings. And as we cleared the ground, we then replanted our seeds, or our seedlings, I should say. And we were also given many seedlings from our allotment neighbours, and Shinya from Yatesbury gave me some. So it was really encouraging that first year to see how much progress we'd made. And it was just, as I said, great to be outside, getting to know our allotment neighbours. And we actually, when I counted them, we grew well over 30 different types of fruit and vegetables last year. Some of them were actually were already there. So we had a pear tree and a plum tree. We had some raspberries. I discovered some asparagus, which is a lovely find. We had lots of rosemary and sage, which I had to cut back because it was growing completely wild. So the challenges are interesting because they didn't really affect very much what our success was at the end of the day. Yes, the soil is heavy clay. It's quite sticky. It tends to flood and it actually doesn't retain the moisture very well. So that in itself is a bit of a challenge, but I was actually pleasantly surprised when we started digging how much life there was under the soil, lots of worms, and you know, it was actually looking a lot better than I thought. The drought, it was definitely a dry summer, so it would take us an hour and a half to actually water everything every day. The wind was another problem. It's been very windy weather over the last couple of years, and a lot of the structures that we had up to grow our beans, they kind of keeled over a bit, but we didn't really lose much produce, but it was getting very untidy for a while. So we're going to try using wigwam structures this year. And as I said, you know, the frost took us by surprise because it was later than I had ever experienced. Probably the beginning of May, we had a frost. So I've actually bought some frost fleece for this year. I put weeds in here as a challenge. In fact, like Marcus and Manuela, the weeds are not really an issue for me. I did get rid of the tall weeds or anything that was suffocating the smaller plants. But actually, it actually proved to be a bonus having a little bit of groundweed because it helped to maintain some of the moisture. It was easier at work, not worrying too much about weeds. We had thousands of aphids on our beans, but luckily we had hundreds of ladybirds as well. So I didn't feel, yes, we had a few sacrificed plants, but actually it didn't affect overall our produce. The birds were a pleasure to look at, and I was quite enjoying looking at them, but they were a little challenge because once our back was turned, they started plucking out the newly planted brassicas. So I came back with some foil trays and put them on poles, and they were flapping about in the breeze, and that seemed to keep the birds away from the brassicas, and it worked well. The cabbage butterfly was a big problem initially, and luckily I was tipped off by an allotment neighbour, and I just got a glove and I started wiping away all the eggs. As I was going down to water each day, I would just take away the excess eggs, and it didn't seem to be a big issue at the end of the day. And it was too late in the season to actually find any fine netting, and but I have since bought some, and I'm going to use those this year. One of the challenges that I've faced is actually advice from others, and that includes my friends who I'm sharing the allotment with. They are hell-bent on actually putting some manure on the allotment because they said it needs something. They want to get some mushroom compost, which I know contains manure. And at the moment, I don't feel that it needs it. And so we've compromised. And what we've decided to do was actually do a little test on, they're going to actually have their own little patch this year. And I'm afraid I have to respect their wishes, and they're going to do what they will do on their patch. So this is the allotment as it is today. So I've actually there is quite a few weeds on there because things haven't really grown over the winter. We have still got lots of produce. I've got kale, got chard, some sweet, and this is just what I picked last weekend, just for my use over the weekend. So I've got Jerusalem artichokes, some carrots, some kale, chard, and kalettes, which are a hybrid of kale and Brussels sprouts, and some potatoes that I grew from seed that I bought at the Shumei Centre, and they did really well this year. So my plan for this year is to organize my seeds, and I've actually done an awful lot of seed saving. So I've actually got a little box and divided in, you can't see here, but it's kind of divided into the months of growth. And and I'm also going to keep a diary, because I think it is important to write down what works and what doesn't, because it's difficult to remember from one year to the next. I'm also going to try and practice continuous cropping. So from this year, I'm going to just do meter squares because I want to increase the amount of produce, or sorry, the variety of produce that I grow. I've also got some whiskey barrels that I'm going to move down to the allotment to collect some rainwater, because it will make the job of watering a little bit easier. It's worth a try. I actually grew a lot of bee-friendly wildflowers as well this year or last year, and it actually might have impacted on how well the fruit trees that were already existing there did. And actually, people commented that they'd never seen pears on the pear tree before. So maybe the wildflowers that were beside the pear tree did their job. They attracted the bees who did the pollination for us. So I'm hoping that over time I can influence those around me, my experienced gardening allotment neighbours, to consider aspects of natural agriculture. And meanwhile, I'm going to continue gardening intuitively, because I feel that I think once you get the gist of natural agriculture, that as long as you observe what's going on in nature, that you can't really go wrong. So that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Breda. Let's have a look at some questions and answers regarding your story. 300 square meters is quite a sizable allotment, so well done. Let's have a look if we have some questions and answers. Can you see it from your side, Breda?
What I tend to do is actually, what I think is correct anyway, is to maybe remove the excess and just accept that you'll get a certain amount of insects anyway. And my understanding is that with each year, if you are saving seeds and growing plants from that seed, they will get stronger, and so they tend to withstand or maybe not attract the insects so much. So I just remove the excess. Actually, what I did was, to make it look pretty, I actually made a large raised bed across the front of the allotment. So it's actually near the fruit trees. But this year, I'm actually going to plant little pockets of them throughout the allotment.
One more question is in chat, Breda, if you were to...
Okay. How do you feel about bringing more sculptural forms to the garden in terms of land art, structures, benches, etc.? I'm all for it. I think there's no reason why an allotment or a garden, just because you're growing vegetables, need to be ugly. I think it's beautiful to actually have pretty things around you. And that is actually part of my plan. I'm actually in the process of making a nice bench for my allotment out of recycled pallet wood. So a great idea. So someone's asked about what kind of flowers am I planting for the bees. I've actually bought packets of wildflower seeds. So they're a big mixture of things.
Okay, I think that would be it so far for Breda. And what a lovely image to finish the first part of the conference with, the flowers.